This video is going to talk you through exercises 9.55 and on in your textbook. It's video 8, I believe, in our series. And much of the code I have already written, so I'm going to just be talking you through it. But we're going to implement a grow method in the Proton wave. We're going to test it, and we're going to add some sound to it. So we're going to take a look at our code in Proton wave. And in Proton wave, what we're going to do is, first of all, we want to grow a proton wave, and we also want to add sound. So to add sound, we just need to call on the Greenfoot library, and you're going to add greenfoot.playSound proton wave, and that should add sound to our project. And the other thing that we want to do is to grow a proton wave within our act method. And the first time that I wrote this code or created this code, I grew my proton waves before I checked for collision, and that was causing an error because I was trying to check for collisions with something that wasn't there, I believe. It was one of those errors that we get where we're checking for an object that's been removed from the world. And so we want to have check collision before grow in order to access that. The other thing that we want to do in this code is we're going to add some sound. We did that. We'll test our proton wave in just a moment. But in the rocket class, we're going to create a new start proton wave, and we're going to use check keys to set a key of Z for the proton wave. We want to create the proton wave at the current coordinates of the rocket. And then we're also going to change this gun reload time, and we're going to look at the reload delay count that they did for the firing, and we're going to implement something similar for the rocket. Because I've made several changes, we're just going to actually step through the entire code for the rocket just to make sure that you have everything. And then we're also going to write, I believe, the start proton wave method. So we're going to go to the rocket class. And we're going to start at the very beginning and just look through everything that you should have. There are not any extra imports that you have to add in the rocket class. We are going to add this line of code here for the proton wave, and it's private static final int proton reload time. And this reload time you want to increase in order to make the game more realistic. I'm keeping it fairly low right now just because for demonstration purposes. Also, we need to add a new variable here. It's private int proton delay count, and so that's going to, both of those together are going to help us reset the proton wave, and so that it won't actually execute too frequently to make the game too easy. In our initializer, in our constructor, I don't believe anything here changes. We've got reload delay count 5, proton reload time. I don't know if we need to reset it here or later. I'm going to leave it for right now because I believe this code is working. And then we are going to look at our act method. My current act method, we have the move method, check keys, check collision, and then we add or increment to the reload delay count, and that one happens to be for the bullets. And then the second one is going to be for the proton wave. So both of our items in our arsenal are going to be incremented within the act method. Check keys should all be set up except for our check if the Z key is down. And the Z key is going to access or start the proton wave. So when we press the letter Z, a proton wave should start. And that is just if Greenfoot is keyed down, Z, we're going to start the proton wave. And whenever I'm coding this, I usually just do a copy and then I do a paste, and I can just change the Z and write in the method call that I need. So you want to make sure that you have this code added, because that's going to gain you the keyboard access. And then lastly, we're going to look at the start proton wave. Because I don't believe that this has been written before, we're going to take a look at it. You will have to write this entire method. It's a private method because we only want it accessed at this level. And if the proton delay count is greater than or equal to the reload time, then we can actually access the proton wave. And we have to create a current new proton wave. And remember, that loads those images. Whenever you do that, it loads the 30 images so that it's going to be ready to expand for us. And then we have to get the current world, get world. We're going to add an object, and we're going to add the wave at that current X and the current Y of the rocket. So this is the rocket's location. So the wave is from the rocket's location. And lastly, we're going to do the proton delay count. We're going to reset that to 0. So that once I fire the proton wave, I have to reset my counter. Lastly, I don't remember for sure if we've written check collision. I don't think that we have. Actually, this is check collision in rocket. So this check collision here, we have written for rocket. In a few moments, we are going to have to write a check collision for the proton wave. So we are going to borrow this code or put a similar piece of code like this in our proton wave class. For right now, we can just leave that. Looks like I have some previous notes here. We shouldn't need this right now. And actually, if we take a look at the code that's highlighted out, I'll just make a comment here. This was my previous code, and it did not work. And I just want to comment, it didn't work because I was accessing a world object as a world, and I need to work with the subclass of space. So if you're having problems in your code, and especially when you're designing your game, you might want to, if you have errors like this, you might want to consider, are you using the subclass versus using the superclass? So the superclass did not work here, so I had to change my code to work with the subclass. And lastly, this is code that we should have already written, so I'm not going to talk through all of this. You should have your Ignite code, and that we did that earlier, but that's what the code looks like if you're kind of trying to clean up your code to get it to work. And our last method in Rocket is the fire method, and it's going to look like this. Notice again the delay count and the gun reload, and they reset the counter on the reload, and it's very similar to our proton wave. Okay, the last thing that we should have to do then is to go to our proton wave and check the collision. And I believe I've written this code already, or it's partially written. So in our proton wave, we're going to start at the beginning of the program and work our way through again just to make sure that we have everything, because I've made several edits. I'm not sure exactly what I've changed. One thing we have to make sure of if we're going to use our proton wave correctly is to import the java.util list. And I'll mention where we use that in a few minutes. So make sure that you have this import statement up here. Java.util list is going to be added. And on our proton wave, it's going to access, we have 30 damage. And we already counted through, we have 30 images that make it grow from small to large. We have our array of images, and we have our current image starting at 0. And our initializer, or our constructor, right here is our constructor that creates a proton wave. We initialize the images. We set the first image to 0, and then we play the sound.